Good morning, dear students. Let's start with Unit 6, General Principles and Processes of Isolation of Elements. The first 3 pages of this unit include History of Indian Metallurgy. You can go through these pages. Just simply read these pages. We'll be starting with the topic Occurrence of Metals. Few elements like carbon, sulfur, gold and noble gases, they occur in free state while others are found in the combined form in the earth crust. Elements, they vary in their abundance. Among metals, aluminium is the third most abundant element in the earth crust, and it is a major component of many igneous minerals including mica and clay. Many gemstones are impure form of alumina, which is Al2O3. And for example, ruby gem has chromium as the impurity and sapphire has cobalt as the impurity. Iron is the second most abundant metal in the earth crust, and it is found in variety of compounds, and also it is a very important element, and it is a very essential element in the biological system. We know that hemoglobin contains iron. Then we come to the definition of minerals. Minerals are naturally occurring substances which are present in the earth crust and they are obtained through mining. The mineral from which metal can be obtained is known as ore. This is a table where you find the various metal and the ores from which they can be obtained, and this is the composition of the various ores. So you can please go through this table very nicely. Then the entire scientific and technological process which is used for the isolation of the metal from its ore is known as metallurgy. The ore contains some undesired materials which we call as gangue, and our aim is to remove the gangue. So the extraction and isolation of metals from the ores involve 3 major steps. The first step is concentration of the ore, which involves the removal of the gangue particles, and second is isolation of the metal from its concentrated ore. Then third is purification of the metal. Let me show you a flow sheet of the metallurgical processes. First we have the ore. The ore is subjected to crushing and grinding and we get the powdered ore. Then in the step number 2 is the concentration of the ore, and these are the various methods which can be employed. We'll be studying these methods: levitation, electromagnetic separation, froth flotation, leaching, and then we get the concentrated ore. Then in the next step is the working of the concentrated ore, that is oxidation and reduction processes. So in this our aim is to convert the ore into metal oxide, because oxides are easy to reduce. So if we have the sulfide ore, then we subject it to the process of roasting, and if we have carbonate ores and other hydrated oxides, we subject them to the process of calcination. Roasting is a process in which we have sufficient supply of the air, and in this calcination either there is an absence of air or limited supply of air. So once we have got the metal oxide, the next step is to convert this metal oxide into metal. The following processes are employed. Smelting is the reduction with carbon, and then we have the hydrogen reduction or auto reduction, hydrometallurgy and electrolytic reduction. By all these processes we get the crude metal. Then the step number 4 is purification and refining, and in this step we can employ these various processes, for example distillation, liquefaction, poling, electrolytic refining, zone refining, vapor phase refining. For different elements different methods can be employed and we get the pure metal. In this chapter we are to study first about ore, then the powdered ore is subjected to concentration. We'll study the various methods, and then from the concentrated ore we'll be getting the crude metal by first converting it into the metal oxide and then converting that oxide to metal, and then we get the crude metal, and the various processes are employed for refining the metal to get the pure metal. Let's discuss about the concentration of ores. The removal of unwanted materials from the ore such as sand and clay is known as concentration. It is also known as ore dressing or benefaction of the ore. The step involved in this is that first the ore is crushed, and then it is subjected to various steps depending upon the difference in the physical properties of the ore and the gangue particle. For example, if the difference between the ore and the gangue particle is based on specific gravities, then the method uses hydraulic washing. So it is based on the difference between specific gravities of the ore and the gangue particle, and in this, a stream of running water is used to wash the powdered ore. The gangue particles, which are lighter, they are washed away, and the heavier particles, they are left behind. This magnetic separation is used when either the ore is magnetic or the gangue particles are magnetic. So what happened? This is a conveyor belt. These are the magnetic roller. The powdered ore is passed through this. The magnetic particles, they are attracted towards the magnetic roller, and the non-magnetic particles, they are separated. So thus this magnetic separation is employed if the difference is in the magnetic properties of the ore components, right? And hydraulic washing is applied when there is a difference between the specific gravities of the ore and the gangue particles. Now the next is the froth flotation process. This is used for removing the gangue from sulfide ores, and in this collectors and froth stabilizers are used. The collectors are the pine oil, fatty acids, xanthates, and the froth stabilizers stabilize the froth. They are cresol, aniline. The sulfide ore particles, they are wetted by oil, and the gangue particles are wetted by water. This is the setup. In this setup, there is a rotating paddle. It agitates the mixture and draws in air, as a result of which the froth is formed. The froth carries the sulfide ore particles, and this froth is light and it can be easily skimmed off, and then it is dried for the recovery of the ore particles. Sometimes there are two sulfide ores and we want to separate them. We can use we can adjust the proportion of oil to water, or by using depressant. The depressant used is sodium cyanide. For example, we have the ore containing zinc sulfide and lead sulfide. We use sodium cyanide. This sodium cyanide forms a complex with zinc sulfide, and as a result of formation of this complex, the lead sulfide comes to the froth, but zinc sulfide is not able to come to the froth. Let's study about leaching. Leaching is used if the ore is soluble in some suitable solvent. The principal ore of aluminium is bauxite. It contains iron oxide, titanium oxide, and silicon dioxide as impurities. The powdered ore is treated with a concentrated solution of sodium hydroxide, and this process is called digestion. As a result of this, Al2O3 forms sodium aluminate. We can see the reaction. Al2O3 combines with sodium hydroxide to form sodium aluminate, and also there is a formation of sodium silicate. The other impurities, they are left behind. This sodium aluminate is neutralized by passing carbon dioxide, as a result of which we get hydrated alumina or hydrated Al2O3. In order to induce precipitation, some sample of hydrated Al2O3 is added from outside. This process is called seeding. We can see here the reaction. Sodium aluminate combines with carbon dioxide, and the solution is neutralized with the formation of hydrated Al2O3 or hydrated alumina. The sodium silicate, it remains in the solution, and hydrated alumina is filtered, dried and heated to give back pure alumina or Al2O3. We can see the steps here, that it is dried, heated, and we get the pure Al2O3, which is used in further reactions to get aluminium. We can see the other examples. In the metallurgy of gold and silver, the metal is leached with sodium cyanide or potassium cyanide in the presence of air, and we see the following reaction happening. This metal can be silver or gold. It is treated with sodium cyanide solution. Oxygen is passed. As a result of this, complex is formed. The dicyanoargentate or dicyanoorate complex is formed. This complex is then treated with zinc, and we get the complex tetracyanozincate. Okay, and the metal is set free. So Here you can see in the first step, oxygen is the oxidizing agent. The oxidation process is taking place here, and in this step the reduction is taking place here. So question generally come, what is the role of zinc? So you can write zinc is acting as a reducing agent. Also you can write that zinc is an active metal. It can displace the metal from its complex. Right? Let's discuss about extraction of crude metal from concentrated ore. In order to extract the metal from concentrated ore, it must be converted to a form which is suitable for reduction to metals. As oxides are easy to reduce, so we prefer converting the sulfide ores also to oxide. So the isolation of metal from concentrated ore involves two major steps. One is the conversion of oxide, and second is the reduction of the oxide to metal. The conversion to oxide involves two steps. It can be calcination or roasting. Calcination is heating in the absence of air or limited supply of air. It removes the volatile matter which escapes, leaving behind the metal oxide. It is applicable to carbonate ores as well as the oxides which are hydrated. So you can see the moisture going off here, and here the carbonate ores are converted into oxides because oxides are easy to reduce. In roasting, first of all, roasting is applicable for sulfide ores. In this, the ore is heated in a regular supply of air in a furnace at a temperature below the melting point of the metal. You can see here, these sulfide ores are being converted to their oxide. Zinc sulfide being converted to zinc oxide, and lead sulfide being converted to lead oxide. Cuprous sulfide being converted to cuprous oxide. Then we come to the next step, the reduction of oxide to the metal. In this reduction of oxide, it generally involves heating with the reducing agent, for example, carbon or carbon monoxide. And the reducing agent, for example, if we take carbon, it combines with the oxygen of the metal oxide. As a result of this, what happens? This metal is freed and carbon monoxide is formed. Then we come to the thermodynamic principles of metallurgy. We know that for a process to be spontaneous, delta G has to be negative. So this thing we know. So the Ellingham diagram, these are the graphical representation of the Gibbs energy with temperature. And these diagrams help us in predicting the feasibility of thermal reduction of an ore. In this diagram, you need to remember two things. One, the element of the lower line will reduce the oxide of the element of the upper line. And secondly, at point of intersection, delta G becomes 0. Below that, the reduction can take place. For example, you see here the two lines. The element of the lower line can reduce the oxide of the element of the upper line. That is, magnesium can reduce alumina. And second, at point of intersection, the delta G becomes 0. And below this point, the reduction can take place. Then this we can understand more with the help of these examples. Suggest a condition under which magnesium could reduce alumina. So these are the two equations, and we see that at the point of intersection the delta G is 0, and below that point magnesium can reduce alumina. We can once again see from the diagram here, this is the point where delta G becomes 0, and below this point the magnesium can reduce alumina, because in doing so the delta G becomes negative, and that is the process is spontaneous. Then we come to the, although thermodynamically feasible, in practice the magnesium metal is not used for the reduction of alumina. This is because the process is uneconomical. Then why is the reduction of a metal oxide easier if the metal formed is in the liquid state at the temperature of reduction? See, when the metal is in the liquid state, that means its entropy is higher, and when the entropy is higher, the delta G is bound to be more negative. That is, the process is going to be spontaneous, right? I hope this is clear to everyone. These Ellingham diagram, again you see, we'll come back to this when we will study about the blast furnace. We'll see the choice of the reducing agent. So this diagram help us in choosing a suitable reducing agent, and in this we plot delta G versus temperature. I hope this is clear. See, many questions have appeared in competitive exam also. Considering Ellingham diagram, which of the metal can be used to reduce alumina? So for alumina, the metal is magnesium. And according to Ellingham diagram, the oxidation reaction of carbon to carbon monoxide may be used to reduce which one of the following oxide at lowest temperature. So you can see here, this line, carbon to carbon monoxide line, this line can reduce cuprous oxide at low temperature. You can see at low temperature, this line can reduce cuprous oxide at low temperature. So this is the answer. So this helps you in doing the various questions. Okay, let's discuss the applications of thermodynamic principles of metallurgy. First, we'll discuss the extraction of iron from its oxides. After the process of concentration, the mixture of oxide ores of iron, they are subjected to calcination, roasting in order to remove water, to decompose the carbonates and to oxidize the sulfides. After that, they are mixed with limestone and coke and they are fed into the blast furnace from the top. In the blast furnace, the oxide is reduced to the metal. Let's see the blast furnace here. So in this blast furnace, the ore, limestone and coke, they are fed from the top. A blast of hot air is blown from the bottom by burning coke in the lower portion to give a temperature range of around 2200 Kelvin. The carbon monoxide and heat, they move to the upper part of the furnace. At different temperature ranges, the different reactions take place. Let's see first about calcium carbonate, the limestone which is added. It decomposed to form calcium oxide. This calcium oxide combines with the impurity silica to form the slag. Okay, so calcium oxide is formed in the temperature range of 500 to 800 and slag is formed in the temperature range of 900 to 1500 Kelvin, and this molten slag can be then separated from the iron. So we see here in the 500 to 800 Kelvin temperature range, the Fe2O3 is first combines with carbon monoxide to form Fe3O4. This Fe3O4 combines with more of carbon monoxide to form iron and carbon dioxide, and Fe2O3 combines with less of carbon monoxide to form FeO. Now at 900 to 1500 Kelvin, the carbon combines with carbon dioxide to form carbon monoxide, and this carbon monoxide combines with the FeO to form iron. The iron obtained from the blast furnace is called pig iron, and this pig iron has a carbon percentage of 4%. It has 4% carbon, and thus it is known as pig iron. This pig iron can be casted into various shapes and is known as cast iron. So the cast iron is obtained from pig iron, and it is made by melting the pig iron with scrap iron and coke using hot air blast. This cast iron has carbon content of 3% and it is very hard and brittle. Then we have the wrought iron, which is the purest form of iron, and it is prepared from cast iron by oxidizing the impurities in a reverberatory furnace which is lined with hematite. So the hematite combines with the carbon to form iron and carbon monoxide. Now I would like to tell you that at high temperature range, the reducing agent is carbon, and at low temperature range, the reducing agent is carbon monoxide. So this choice of the reducing agent can be found from the Ellingham diagrams. You can see this is the line of iron. At high temperature range, the line of carbon is below the line of iron, and so this can be used as the reducing agent. And at low temperature range, the carbon monoxide line is below the line of iron. So element of the lower line can reduce the oxide of the element of the upper line. This is what we have learned in Ellingham diagrams. So you can see here the carbon is the reducing agent at high temperature and carbon monoxide is the reducing agent at low temperatures. Extraction of copper from cuprous oxide. In the Ellingham diagram, that is the plot of delta G versus T for the formation of oxides, The Cu2O line is at the top, so it is very easy to reduce these oxide ores of copper to the metal by heating with coke. Let me show you the Lingam diagram again. You can see here the Cu2O line is at the top when we plot delta G versus T, and the carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide lines are below. So that means the carbon can be used to reduce the oxide of copper. So then what happens is, as the ores of copper are generally the sulfide ores, and then these sulfide ores are first roasted to give the oxides, because oxides are easy to reduce, and then these oxides are heated with carbon and they get converted to copper. But in actual process, what happens is that the sulfide ore of copper is mixed with silica and it is heated in a reverberatory furnace. This mixing with silica is done because of the presence of iron as the impurity. In the reverberatory furnace, the iron oxide slags off as iron silicate, and the copper which we get from the furnace is in the form of a copper matte. This copper matte has the composition Cu2s and Fe(S). So we can see here that iron oxide combines with silica to form the slag, which is FeSiO3. This copper matte which is produced, it is then fed into a silica lined converter and hot air blast is blown. The following reactions take place. We can see that iron sulfide impurity combines with oxygen to form FeO, and this FeO combines with silica to form the FeSiO3, which is the slag. The Cu2s combines with oxygen to form Cu2O, and this Cu2O combines with Cu2s to give copper. This is known as auto-reduction. So this solidified copper obtained has blistered appearance because of the evolution of this sulfur dioxide, and so this copper is known as blister copper. Now let's see the extraction of zinc from zinc oxide. The reduction of zinc oxide is done using coke. So we can see that zinc oxide on heating with coke forms zinc and carbon monoxide, and then this metal, zinc metal, is distilled off and is collected by rapid chilling. Let's discuss about the electrochemical principles of metallurgy. We have already discussed the thermodynamic principles of metallurgy, in which the basic concepts of thermodynamics helped us in understanding the theory of metallurgical transformations. The Gibbs energy was the most significant term there, and the change in Gibbs energy, that is delta G is equal to delta H minus D delta S, helped us in understanding the various spontaneous processes. We discussed the Lingam diagrams in which we plotted delta G versus temperature. In that, we've studied that the element of the lower line can reduce the oxide of the element of the upper line. This can be done because the delta G for that reaction comes out to be negative, that is, the process is spontaneous. Similarly, these electrochemical principles of metallurgy, they help us in understanding the various electrochemical processes, like the equation we had there was delta G is equal to delta H minus D delta S. Here the equation is delta G is equal to minus N E naught F. This N is the number of electrons gained or lost, and E naught is the electrode potential of the redox couple which is formed in the system. Now this redox couple is, we have one cathode, one anode, and they constitute the redox couple, because at cathode reduction will take place and at anode oxidation will take place. So from one point there will be loss of electron, and at the other end there will be gain of electron, and that is the N. If one electron is gained or lost, two are gained or lost, this N we find from there. So I hope the term redox couple is clear to everyone. So the more reactive metals, let me talk about zinc. Now zinc has a very large negative value of the electrode potential, right? So the reduction of zinc is very difficult. Zinc cannot accept electrons, it can only lose electrons. If the difference of the two E naught values, now we say we have a zinc copper couple and redox couple is zinc copper. So zinc will lose electron and copper will gain electrons. So, and the difference of these should come out to be a positive E naught. Then only the reaction is going to be spontaneous. If we put that positive E naught value here, then only the delta G is going to be negative. Okay. So for a process to be spontaneous, E naught cell should be positive and delta G should be negative. This E naught cell can be found by this relation E naught cathode minus E naught anode. We'll be studying all this in detail in our electrochemistry class. Now you can see we have the copper and iron. This is the redox couple. Copper will gain electron and iron will lose electron, because iron is an active metal. It is going to, so it has negative value of the reduction potential. So what will happen? This copper will come into the, this will precipitate out, right? It will come out of the solution and this will go into the solution. So we can see here this is an electrolytic cell for the extraction of aluminium. So in the metallurgy of aluminium, the alumina which we have purified by the process of leaching is mixed with cryolite. This is your cryolite, Na3AlF6. This is the formula of the cryolite. Or we can also add calcium fluoride. The purpose of adding this is that they lower the melting point of the mixture and they bring in conductivity. So they lower the melting point of the mix and increase the conductivity. This is a question generally asked, that what is the role of Na3AlF6 or calcium fluoride. So the answer is they lower the melting point of the mix and also they bring conductivity. Now in electrolysis we have one cathode and one anode. So this is graphite acts as anode and the steel vessel with carbon lining act as cathode. These are also the question asked in the competitive exams, that which is cathode in the process and which is anode. This process, let me tell you, is known as Hall-Héroult process, right? So what is the cathode in the Hall-Héroult process? What is the anode in the Hall-Héroult process? So now this is the overall reaction that takes place in the electrolytic tank, and this alumina combines with carbon to form aluminium and carbon dioxide. These are the cathode and the anode reaction. At cathode, reduction take place. So aluminium ion take 3 electrons to form aluminium, and at anode, oxidation take place. There is a formation of carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide. The first, in this electrolysis, the oxygen is liberated at anode, and this oxygen reacts with the carbon of the anode and produce carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide. Due to this reason, for 1 kilogram of aluminium produced, 0.5 kg of carbon anode is burnt away, right? So that is why we have to replace the anode again and again. This anode is the graphite rod. So graphite rods, these are the graphite rods, and they have to be replaced because they are used up. For 1 kg of aluminium, the production 0.5 kg of carbon anode is burnt away. This is also a question which is asked in the competitive exam. So this paragraph whole is very important. So definitely question is there in the paper in this. First is, what is the role of this Na3AlF6 or calcium fluoride? The answer is, it lowers the melting point of the mixture and brings in conductivity. Then write the overall equation in the Hall-Héroult process. So this is the overall equation. Write the equation at cathode and anode. So these are the equations at cathode and anode. Then why this graphite rod has to be replaced again and again? So 1 kilogram of aluminium produce, when 1 kilogram of aluminium is produced, 0.5 kg of anode is burnt away. Due to this, the graphite has to be replaced from time to time, right? Now copper. Copper can be obtained from low-grade ores and scraps by the technique of hydrometallurgy. Now what is this hydrometallurgy? It involves the use of aqueous solution to extract copper from the oxide ores, copper oxide ores, right? So we have to extract copper and we have to use the aqueous solution. So this equation the aqueous solution contains the cuprous ions and they are treated with hydrogen to get copper, and here or they are treated with iron to get copper, right? So this again is important. So copper is extracted by hydrometallurgy from low grade ores. It is leached out using acid or bacteria. Leaching is done with acid and bacteria. The solution which containing the cuprous ion is treated with scrap iron. So this is the equation of scrap iron or hydrogen, and you get what? Copper. We have discussed the reduction of various oxide using the electrochemical principles and thermodynamic principles. There are some extractions which are based on oxidation. For example, the electrolysis of an aqueous solution of sodium chloride, which is known as brine. So that when there is an electrolysis of brine, then the chlorine is evolved. So the chlorine is obtained by electrolysis, and hydrogen and sodium hydroxide are the byproduct. Now we see that in the extraction of gold and silver using sodium cyanide, so this is an oxidation method, and later on the metal is recovered by the displacement method. So gold first forms a complex. Here the oxidation state of gold is 0 and here it is +1. Okay, and then the metal gold can be obtained by using zinc, which is a reducing agent. Zinc is an active metal. It can displace this gold from its salt solution. So by this the gold is obtained. Let's discuss about refining. The metal which is extracted by any method is contaminated with some impurity. In order to obtain metals of high purity, several techniques is used depending upon the difference in the properties of the metal and the impurity. So the first method is distillation. This is useful for low boiling metals like zinc and mercury. In this, the impure metal is evaporated to obtain the pure metal as distillate. Then we come to the liquefaction method. In this method, a low melting metal like tin is made to flow on a sloping surface, and in this way it is separated from higher melting impurities. The higher melting impurities are left back on the sloping surface. Electrolytic refining. In this, the impure metal is made to act as anode, and the same metal in pure form is used as cathode. They are put in a suitable electrolytic bath containing soluble salt of the same metal. The copper is refined using an electrolytic method. The anode is made up of impure copper and the pure copper strips are taken as cathode, and the electrolyte is copper sulfate, and the result is that at anode oxidation take place and cathode reduction take place. This kind of setup is there: anode, cathode, and in the beginning cathode is very thin and then the copper keep on depositing here, and then the cathode starts increasing in size, and this is reduced as anode mud, and this anode mud contains the antimony, selenium, tellurium, silver, gold and platinum. So zinc also is refined in the same manner. Zone refining. This method is based on the principle that impurities, they are more soluble in the molten state than in the solid state of the metal. A heater is moved over the impure rod of the metal, and as the heater moves forward, the pure metal crystallizes out of the melt and is left behind. The impurities, they move along with the heater and they get concentrated at one end, which can be cut off. This method is useful for producing semiconductors and other metals of very high purity, for example germanium, silicon, boron, gallium and indium. In this the question comes, describe the principle involved in zone refining. So you have to write this line that the impurities are more soluble in the melt than in the solid state of the metal. Then we come to the next, vapor phase refining. In this method, the metal is first converted into a volatile compound, and then this volatile compound can be decomposed to give the pure metal. So there are two requirements. The metal should form a volatile compound and the volatile compound should be easily decomposable. Here we have two methods. One is the Mond process, which is used for refining nickel, and the other is the Van Ackeren process for refining zirconium or titanium. In the Mond process for nickel, the nickel is first heated in a stream of carbon monoxide and it forms a volatile complex nickel tetracarbonyl, and this complex is decomposed at higher temperature to give nickel. So in this way the pure metal is obtained. In the Van Ackeren method, this is used for refining both zirconium or titanium. In this method also, the metal is first converted into a volatile compound, and then this volatile compound is easily decomposable and it decomposed to give the pure metal. Chromatographic methods. This is based on the principle that different components of the mixture are adsorbed to different extent on an adsorbent. The mixture is put onto a stationary phase. Then a pure solvent or a mixture of solvent is allowed to move slowly over the stationary phase. The different components of the mixture, they are separated gradually as the moving phase moves. So there are different types of chromatography: paper chromatography, column chromatography. This column chromatography is useful for purification of elements which are available in minute quantities, and the impurities, they are also not much different in chemical properties from the element to be purified. Now let's see the column chromatography. So in column chromatography there are two phases, stationary phase and the mobile phase. This column is packed with alumina, so this constitutes the stationary phase. The mixture of compound which we want to separate, they are kept here. And the mobile phase, this is a mobile phase. It has solvent or a mixture of solvent. The mixture of solvent are made to pass on this stationary phase, and they carry the different components of the mixture, and then they can be separated. So one important thing you need to know is that the mobile phase moves through the stationary phase. The mobile phase and the stationary phase, they are chosen such that the components of the sample have different solubility in the two phases. The component which is quite soluble in the stationary phase takes a longer time to travel through it than a component which is not very soluble in the stationary phase but very soluble in the mobile phase. This means that the component which is very soluble in the stationary phase means the component which is adsorbed to a greater extent. So when you will pass the solvent from the top, when you pass the solvent, it will take a longer time to travel through it than the component which is less adsorbed on the stationary phase but which is very soluble in the mobile phase. Okay, so with this the chapter is over. You can go through the uses of aluminium, copper, zinc and iron. We have already studied this in your junior classes, so you can just go through this uses of aluminium, copper, zinc and iron. The question that generally comes from this topic is, what is the principle involved in the chromatographic method? You simply have to write that different components of the mixture, they are adsorbed to different extent on an adsorbent.